Hi. Hi, Monique. Thank you for allowing me to interview you. I'm going to get right to it. You are the founder of Better Breed Cameroon, which runs quarterly youth development projects, ranging from national writing contests to book drives and career days. Could you describe your path up to the creation of Better Breed Cameroon? Why do you think it was needed? What creating the organization was like? What it takes for it to function?
Okay, thank you. That's actually a very interesting question. I would say the story of Better Bit Cameroon began with me volunteering. Now, if you know Cameroon, we have a very high unemployment rate, actually higher underemployment rate. And I was in dire need of my independence. Growing up, I actually I really wanted to be independent of my family. One of the ways I thought I was going to address the risk of being unemployed after undergrad was to get the work experience before I graduate. So I started volunteering while I was in undergrad. And since I tried to get as much volunteering experience as possible, I was working with community-based organizations, other NGOs in the Boya municipality around the University of Boya. Well, perhaps I could name one, like Reach Out Cameroon, the National Commission for Human Rights and Freedoms, those kind of organizations. I had two experiences with two different organizations actually that I volunteered for that spurred me to set up Better Bit Cameroon. I thought it was needed. During one experience, I recall there was a women's microfinance project where we're typically giving generally very poor women 100,000 francs, which is about, at that time, $200. And you encourage them to set up a business for themselves. Now, these women would take the money and we're supposed to follow them up to make sure that we're trying to get them, according to the project's a poverty alleviation project. And we're supposed to follow them up, make sure that their business plans, their strategies work, everything is in place. And this funding is coming from obviously a bigger organization that gives this community-based organization the money that eventually gives this women the whole pipeline. So eventually, we would give this woman money, and then when we go to follow up, we ask them, what did you do with it? Oh, I borrowed my husband 20,000 francs. Oh, I gave my husband told me that we should divide it this way. Completely different from what we had actually given, like the whole workshop we have done on financing and business management. And when we want to talk to them, they're like, oh, you want to break up my marital home? No, my husband is the head of the house. We are trying to kind of like break them up or divorce them. And that was kind of like the first time I was like, the difference between theory, what we learn in class, because I did gender studies and sociology at undergrad, the difference between what you actually learn in class and what is actually in practice. Mm-hmm. Because in practice, this woman actually could write. If they don't give them money, it's a problem. If their child had malaria or somebody died and they had 100,000 francs that you had given them to start up a new business because you want to save them from poverty, well, don't they use it because the NGO has told you to do just this? Right. So I actually, one of the things that came to mind, that was one of the first times I was like, okay, we need to change the way people think, adjust these things before you can't actually just carry theory into practice, just like that. And unless we change the way people think, you're not going to actually help them develop. It really starts in the mentality. Another project, a Tole Girls project, also triggered me. I spent part of my childhood in the US between the ages of 6 and 12. And actually as an undocumented immigrant under my mother. And while I was there, I did have a lot of exposure to the system in a kind of very different learning system that is more interactive, that encourages a lot of creative thinking, think outside of the box and questioning, more so than Cameroon, where because of the population of the classes, we tend to rely on rote learning and rote memorization. And when, because of this, when I was doing this volunteering with the Tole Girls, these girls were at risk, so that they were out of school, mostly helping their parents on the farms, and just aspiring towards getting married, and really had low prospects to get out of the cycle of poverty. So we were supposed to be teaching them trades or things that they can monetize, like skills they can monetize, how to make snacks and basically things like that. And while I was there with them, it was another dawning, like, basically, you're trying to save these girls by teaching them things that will keep them under you. Because it's not really going to break the cycle of poverty by telling them that they should sell things like slippers that they have made or handcrafted things. It will provide for them in that moment, but it will not break the cycle.
Yeah.
So that's actually what inspired Better Breed. So by the time I was graduating, I had that work experience, that volunteer experience, and I had a whole document full of ideas inspired by my experiences. If we can take the girls to schools to see people that are doing things, for example, out of their neighborhood, to expose them, kind of think, I don't know if you've watched Freedom Writers, think that kind of project, take them out of the neighborhood that they're in and expose them to something else that will make them question, get them to critically consider what they have been socialized with because of their neighborhood, within their neighborhood. And I'll be posing all these projects to other organizations that I was hoping would employ me. And they're, well, we don't get funding for this. I have the organization, what INGOs, well, kind of put it, multilateral organizations who were willing to fund. So if, for instance, what was in fashion or in vogue was recycling. So even if we have our own way of recycling, we use bottles 100 times until they can possibly not be used anymore. Or we use plastics like 100 times. Everybody has a plastic with a lot of other plastics in them. So it's not from us that we do not recycle, but we're trying to write project proposals to get funding for recycling projects, because that's what is in vogue right now. And that's what the multilateral organizations are giving money for. So if you're coming with your project that take these kids, this kind of freedom writers like project, it is a good idea, it's nice, but not really something that they can see themselves getting funding for. So none of my projects were taken and I wasn't actually employed. But by that time, I actually, upon graduation, I received an award for academic excellence despite disability. And so I had some chunk of change, it was $400. And I had a chunk of change for the first time, that what to do with it. And a friend of mine told me, well, rather than walking from office to office, trying to pitch your projects, perhaps you can just set up your organization and do the little that you can, start from there. So that's how I set up Better Breed Cameroon in January of 2013.
That's great. I mean, I was just, I mean, that's an aside, but just that reminds me, of course, of the conversation we had on Decolonize That with Jahan, right? I mean, the idea that there would be trends to this. I mean, it's not really surprising, but it's just so. I mean, especially what you're describing is, it makes me think. I know a lot of people in education, and you face this all the time, right? Where something's trendy, certain type of activities or whatever, and then all of a sudden everybody has to do this, whether or not it fits the population you're actually addressing, every day, right? And it's like it will look good to someone who can, check a box somewhere, and then that sort of justifies the choices that are made. That's really anyway. That's kind of an aside, but it's just like it's always appalling, right? It's always the same. It's sort of the same story. It's just it never. Anyway, I can never get over it. But so, my second question was: we're speaking at a time of profound distress for Cameroon, with notably with the Anglophone crisis. In the past few years, I've seen an increase in state violence and other forms of violence in the country. Could you tell us more about that crisis, maybe in general, or however specific you want to be?
Let me see. I don't know where to start regarding that. What would you like to know about the crisis? Because it's a lot.
Right.
I would actually say the crisis is a convoluted mess right now. In describing the crisis, perhaps, I remember something a boss of mine had said before, and it's not, he wasn't saying it favorably. He was actually saying it against the struggle. He said, striking is a careless thing to do, according to him. This is somebody that, in my opinion, is pretty much pro whatever benefits him. So honestly, it's an ex-boss, but just. So he says striking was a careless thing because when somebody starts striking at the bottom of the hill, that he's hungry, and he's climbing up the hill, 2 other people will join him to add their voices to his, and they're hungry. As they progress up the hill, 3 other people will join. They're no longer joining you because they're hungry. They're joining you with their own problems. By the time you reach the top of the hill, you see you have a mass of people, but nobody actually knows what the original problem was. Because as more people add in, the voice, the original voice easily changes. And that's how violence breaks out. So in his opinion, the struggle, as we call it, was a dangerous thing and was a careless thing. Looking back at it, when he said it, I was actually offended. But looking back at it, he has a point. Although his point is not what his point he was making was not what I agree with. It's not a matter of not striking; it's a matter of making sure that the original voice is kept sane and the original purpose is kept sane throughout. Is you do not cancel the struggle.
Right.
The difficulties in maintaining the struggle. And as it is now, the crisis has changed from what it was in 2016. And actually, I can't even say it began in 2016. This thing is historical. We all know that it's actually like way back from the colonial era, from, if you want to say, the Fumban Conference from 1972, when the federalism was actually stolen from us or broken. The pact was broken. So it's more of a historical thing. However, because of the mismanagement of the government's response to a legit problem, we now have a war that is unnecessary, a war that is actually harming the people that it's supposed to be. The struggle is harming the people it's supposed to be saving. We have, for the last 5 years now, because I think the crisis as we know it, this chapter of it at least began in 2016. And it began just so carelessly. It began around my birthday, actually. It began so carelessly, the little thing. I remember writing a blog tracking how this thing started with the lawyers' protests and then the teachers joining in, and somebody else, BBC Mancho Ashohole, coming in with his own protest, and how everything just raveled on, because when people are angry and one person is angry and other people join in, we start seeing that we have a whole different thing. Something that started as a union strike with lawyers, progressed with teachers supporting the lawyers, progressed to now a request for federalism, and has progressed to now a war for separation over the course of 5 years. And what disappoints me on a regular basis is that the war is never fought between the people that actually need to be fighting the war, that are actually calling for the war, that are calling for bloodshed. The war is fought on the grass where the weak are. The people that are actually at the bottom that have no voice are the ones that are feeling it. We have not had anybody actually attack those in power that are in the central region. But on a regular basis, we hear of women being attacked in the Northwest and Southwest region. On a regular basis, we have people since 2018, between 2017 and 2018, the ghost towns were sporadic, not so serious. but you could say since 2018, it became very serious, grave, and you're pretty much imprisoned in your own house.
Mm-hmm. Could you
on the
explain,
declaration of people.
could you explain that notion of ghost town?
It's a form of silent protest. It's a form of peaceful protest, actually. It's really a good method of peaceful protest originally. If used right, it's been abused right now. What was declared was, okay, so I think it's in 2016 that when they started, the lawyers began striking because of the abuse of the English common law system. As you know, we are a bilingual country because of colonialism, ruled by both the English and the French. And we were supposed to be operated as a federalist country. However, that was abused, that contract was broken. And gradually we have been assimilated by the Francophone system. So it's basically like you're appointing French civil law that is completely different from English common law. And you're appointing French lawyers and French magistrates in common law courts. And you're superseding one legal system with the other. It's a process, it's kind of like an assimilation. So they were striking, it's part of like a union strike, and they were abused and ignored. Teachers also came in, we came in now. I remember the lecturer syndicate came in and said, okay, we also support the lawyers. And they're right, because Francophone teachers are also being appointed in Anglophone schools and they can't teach students in English. And there's an assimilation of the Anglophone or Anglo-Saxon educational system. And we tell you how this is happening. We can show you how it's been happening over such a number of years. And so we support the lawyers. And what the teachers called for is a sit-in strike. It's pretty much just stay at home. The streets should be empty. Nobody operates, no businesses operate, nothing. That's a ghost town. Okay. So you don't see anybody outside except ghosts. So that's actually how it began. People respected it for a bit, but then you know how some people will not respect it unless there's a force. Like, so that's where it became dangerous. So some online influencers, actually on Facebook, bloggers that we're not even based in the country, called for there to be ghost town enforcers. So some people just took upon themselves, some young boys took upon themselves to go out, and if they see you outside attempting to go to school or attempting to go to work, and they rough you up, put the videos online, it's kind of like a threat to tell you that we're serious, nobody should be outside. And that's how ghost towns became serious. After some attacks on the streets, people started getting afraid and they're like, okay, we're not going to go. It progressed to cars being burned if they decided that they were going to operate on ghost town days. So now people actually, what began initially as a common agreed upon form of protest, like we chose it, has become a form of imprisonment, because now you're forcing us to choose it.
Yeah, and
even though this.
And in the process, you have people walking around. So, I mean, it's sort of, I mean, I realize they think that, no, I mean, it's
the enforcers.
Like, right, you're enforcing, but by being out, you know, on the side, I mean, it gives you an incredible amount of power, right? I mean, you're like out there deciding who's legitimate or not. Yeah, that's correct.
And those enforcers, those are enforcers of ghost towns. You're forgetting the fact that there's also the police and the gendarmes and the state people that are also outside. And it got to a point where the mayor, for example, of Boya, the former mayor, would actually go lock up businesses that were locked up to punish people who were locked up on ghost towns for respecting ghost towns. So you are now being punished for respecting your right to stay at home. Because why are you closed on a Monday? So you should pay tax for that. Yeah. So yeah, it became a convoluted thing, and the crisis as it is now, it's very different from what it originally was. But I would like to reiterate that yes, the original problem is still there and the original problem still matters. It's not like the struggle was never supposed to happen. It is supposed to happen. It's just that it has been taken away from us. And because you can't actually, when you push people to the wall, you can't tell them how to express their anger.
No, definitely. So the violence that I've read about against schoolgirls and other, are those related to ghost towns then originally? Is that?
I would say women are actually the women and children are the greatest victims of the crisis right now. Most recently, for instance, there has been an attack on by the General No Mercy, one of the separatist fighting generals of some sort. And they're fighting in the Northwest region against the army, obviously. So you have these separationist fighters fighting the military, none of which we are involved with. None of us actually benefited from them. None of us actually were. We didn't appoint any of the military. We didn't appoint any of the generals. And it was a bloody fight. This recent one seems to have been bloody on the part of the army. They lost a lot of people. And they wanted to have exact revenge. In their bid to exact revenge, what they did was go look, the only person they could find in close enough to General No Mercy was his ex-girlfriend, who is currently pregnant for somebody else. And the army and one of the chiefs that are loyal to them have arrested this woman and abused her, beaten her up, and I think imprisoned her while she's pregnant. Want to know that this is these are people that we're considering law enforcement in a country where you're not, the law states that you cannot imprison somebody who is pregnant because you're indirectly imprisoning their child. But they don't respect their own laws that they make. Aside from the fact that this is somebody that obviously you could say you could call her in for interrogation, you would have a right to do that. But to just abuse her publicly, film it for us to see, it's kind of like, say, we have your ex-girlfriend. And it's a kind of guerrilla tactic that makes you wonder if this is actually the state, if these are the rational people you've actually, this is the law enforcement you're supposed to respect. Or the fact that we have illicit checkpoints all over. I typically joke that I get checked within the Buea municipality. I get checked more within that small town than I do when I'm traveling internationally. I'm scared of losing my identity card than I am of losing my passport, because it's being used as any means for them to abuse you. We have police and gendarme checkpoints about every mile, except where it stops. The more closer you get to the government residential area, to the richer neighborhoods, the checks stop. So it's really pretty much a way of oppressing the poor. And recently, for instance, because of these checkpoints, we have a lot of taxi people who are having to pay bribes on a regular basis, having to, it's just actually, it's a common practice right now. They give these people a long list of documents and taxes that they must pay that they cannot possibly do. So since they get what they can, and then whenever they pass the police checkpoint, they give you 500 francs, which is about the equivalent of $1 or so to escape. It's because it's cheaper. Oh, I don't know actually if it's cheaper, but for them it will be cheaper than following that long process and getting all those documents. So recently, it seems like one of the police checks, another tragedy, another way he actually hurts the children. One of the police checks resulted in the death of a 5-year-old child who was basically with their mother going to school in a hired car. And this driver also wanted to pay, was also being held, his documents being held, that he should step down, the same process. And it seemed a trigger-happy gendarme officer just shot the car and took the life of a child. This would not even be something that's possible. The funniest thing is, or actually not the funny thing, the sad thing is, these checks are being rationalized by the government for our protection. They claim that the police are there, the gendarmes are there to protect us from the separationist fighters who have been attacking schools, because they want us to continue not going to school, staying at home as a form of protest. A form of protest that isn't really working. So after an amount of time, people are tired of this same form of protest, the same strategy, using children, using education as the sacrifice for the struggle. We're like, do something else or go elsewhere, actually go to the central region, do something that will actually affect the people in power, not us. We can't continue sacrificing ourselves for this.
Would you say so?
That
Oh, I'm just lingering on this. So the separationist army you mentioned, they send. Do the ghost town enforcers claim or have connection to these guys, or is that like that's the legitimacy they give themselves to act as enforcers in ghost towns, or how? Or are
the
they?
people that enforce the ghost towns?
Yeah.
Okay, the people that enforce the ghost towns are in the diaspora. As of 2018, the ghost towns become serious because this is another way in which, like, I think the diaspora and the international community has actually caused the crisis to be what it is today.
Okay.
When we have constant ghost towns right now. Every Monday is a fixed ghost town in the Northwest and Southwest region. And that was in a way to show that we are in support, or in, I guess, how can I put it, in spirit with Ayuk Sizikutambe, who is in prison right now, who was arrested and extradited from Nigeria.
Mm-hmm.
So this is how the international community actually added to this, because if they did not help him get arrested, we wouldn't be in this mess in the first place. They were meeting in another country to discuss the struggle. And our government got the tip and got them extradited and imprisoned. And they have been tried for secession and terrorism and a whole lot of charges. So they're pretty much there for life. So in respect, we have been in prison with them for a number of years now. I was hoping and praying that with the onset of the pandemic, our government could have just released them and exiled them, use the excuse of the pandemic to say they're decongesting prisons and kind of like save face if they wanted to save their ego, whatever, and just basically let them go so that we would stop having ghost towns. That's one of the ways they could have resolved this. But yeah, they tried to prove tough. So they're still in prison. And yeah, the diaspora declares the lockdowns. Actually, every Ambazonian leader, Ambazonia being the country that the separationists are fighting for declaring independence over, every Ambazonian leader is not in the country. And that's one of the reasons why I say the struggle is no longer what it should be. One of the criticisms we have of our current government is that President Biya is known for living abroad. He's called the roaming president. We actually count the number of days that he spends in the country. So conversely, we also have a struggle with all our leaders also in the diaspora. The people that are declaring the ghost town, I think Chris Anu should be, I think Ayabacho Lucas, one of the Ambazonian leaders, currently based in Norway. Ikome Sako, another Secretary General of Ambazonia, is based in the US. Chris Anu is also based in the US. None of these people are home. Let me tell you a funny story. In 2019, I was supposed to travel to the US for a UN Women's Conference in March or so. And I have been applying for a visa. So I'm applying for a visa in Yaoundé. And so I have traveled out of the Southwest, out of my hometown to the capital to apply for the visa. And then I get the declaration that ghost town has been declared for 2 weeks. Lockdown. At this point, the difference between ghost town is a lockdown is a long-term ghost town. That's the difference. So they give us a note. They give us a notice. It's pretty much like a day or two before that go and do shopping and keep things in the house because you're going to be locked in the house for 2 weeks. So we get a note by WhatsApp. Somebody sends a voice note, and this is the age of voice phishing. This is the age of voice phishing. We do not even know these people. Most of us can't recognize them. I would be able to point out Chris Anu from Jesus at any point in time. But somebody based in the US, I do not even know which town he's staying in, which state he is based in, can make a voice note and send along their Amazonian networks. And it trickles down to the ground to the ghost town enforcers. And we just get the notice. The civilians just get a notice on our WhatsApp. And you, like a forwarded message just comes to you. Or there's lockdown from this period to this period because we're going to resist the 11th February celebrations. And that's how I got stuck in Yaoundé and I couldn't go back home. And I'm supposed to travel and you can't get any of your things out of town. You can't get anything in town. There, at that time, there will be some daredevil drivers who go in and like the tariffs, since they're risking their life, they pretty much inflate the prices about 4 times as much if you want to go in. So that's how they control us.
Huh. I mean, so I mean that goes to, I'm gonna skip ahead because I had a question about this, about the role of the diaspora, and I mean you've definitely exposed it. So the people you mentioned, are they so they're actual Amazonian leaders in exile? Like did they had to leave the country for political reasons, or they just happened?
I know. They
Yeah.
have not been exiled. These are people that were in the diaspora.
I see. Oh, so they, wow. Okay, that is.
They are Cameroonians in the diaspora. It's not like they were exiled. None of the people involved in this thing. I think of perhaps only one. Has anybody been exiled? Perhaps a writer, Patrick Gangang. Perhaps he has been exiled, but he is actually not even related to the crisis. He just had his Cameroonian passport revoked because he's an American citizen.
Okay.
And he was speaking, yeah. So it's not like he has been exiled. He's a francophone even. He has nothing to do with the actual crisis. It's actually just one of the people that is instigating or supporting the issuing of guns to the separatist fighters and supporting their struggle. So while he was in the country, since he had both American citizenship and somehow had a Cameroonian passport, we don't have dual nationality. He got that revoked and sent away. So it's not like he was exiled.
Right. Okay.
Nobody's actually, yeah. Most of these people are Cameroonians in the diaspora that have finally got their chance to rule. That have finally, and I'm not saying the diasporas are all bad. This struggle wouldn't be where it is right now without the diaspora. And that too is not also a good thing, because a lot of times when they declare these things, they do not consider the impact on the people on the ground. You're going about your life in the US. Your kids are going to school, good schools. You're saving up money. You're working 3 jobs. Even you're a Black man in the US. You have your own problems, but whatever you're declaring has impact on us directly. You're making somebody that is in an already poor country not do business for 2 weeks. You're making a woman whose business is selling perishable goods like tomatoes to lose her stock, because you've kept them in the house for 2 weeks. And that's the impact that they don't consider. And it's aggravating when you see them posting. And I remember one of them, the influencers, Tapang Ivo, also based in the US. Funny enough, he's a former Fulbright scholar. and this is another reason why, if you have to ask me the question concerning how the diaspora, how the international community is involved in this, I'll be like, yeah, I have never been so disillusioned. One of the growing pains has been discovering how useless the UN is and how useless the international community is in actually helping people. Because they don't help if it doesn't benefit them. The US only actually issued a strong statement to these people within the last year. Prior to that, they had done nothing. They knew these people were there. Nigeria, that's next door, that's collecting refugees. doesn't want to get involved because the Ambazonians are pretty much like IPOB in their own their own Biafra fighters next door. So they pretty much just like, take your people. We're not getting involved in this. Nobody else in CEMAC, Cameroon is pretty much one of the best countries in the Central African Republic, considering that the others are worse off. So nobody's going to check phobia.
Right.
We've not really had that much help. The diasporans have helped, though. People in the diaspora have brought attention to the crisis, obviously, have helped by protesting. What I would say is pretty much like, it's not something I admire, the fact that they have been protesting within foreign embassies for them to come save us. Pretty much like a colonial man said, like, please come, going back to British embassy. And I'm like, what do you want these people to do, to come colonize us again?
I mean, I feel like I read that there were some protests in front of Cameroonian embassies in different countries.
Yes.
In South Africa.
They did protest in front of Cameroonian embassies. There have been a lot of protests in front of Cameroonian embassies, but mostly they have protested in front of foreign embassies. Reason being that they know that the Cameroonian embassy doesn't care.
Right.
Protesting in front of them doesn't matter. So, that perhaps the person actually, the ambassador isn't even in there. So they don't really go there. They go to the other embassies. And unfortunately, that makes us look bad because it's pretty much you going back to your colonial master saying, save us.
Well, I mean, to me, I mean, the sort of a somewhat abstract reflection there, but that's also sort of echoing the conversation we had with Jahan, is that, I mean, part of the reason I wonder about the role that the diaspora could play, or the role it actually plays, as you're describing, is that, it keeps bringing me back to a notion that's as simple as it seems difficult to follow, which is that even here you see a form of, activism that ignores the people that most concerned with it, right? I mean, it is very much like a lot of it is, sort of dictating things from the outside when you're not on the ground, and when you won't actually have to suffer directly any of the consequences, right? And you may have the best of intentions, but that physical distance makes for a world of difference, right? Like, I mean, I feel so, the sense I get always is that there are ways to help that sort of demand humility that rarely comes with this kind of intervention, if that makes sense, right? Like, I feel like in the diaspora, that should be, and I mean, not just Cameroonian, right? Like, I'm thinking of other diasporas, including
diaspora. We are patronizing.
Yeah,
we actually become as patronizing as the West, as the colonizers themselves.
It's terrifying.
We think we know better. We have had exposure, so we know better than the person that's on the ground, and so we can use our influence. I remember 2018, they declared a lockdown on Christmas Day, that we shouldn't celebrate Christmas and New Year because there are people dying because their fighters are in the bushes and their fighters are not at home. And since the fighters are in the bushes, we too should not go out. And so Ghost Town enforcers went into some churches on Christmas Day and beat people, flogged people out of church. 2018. And this is obviously always happening in the poor neighborhoods and in the neighborhoods that they have access to. And those in the diaspora, one of my aunts actually were like, oh yes, we're all mourning with those in the bushes. And they're wearing black on Christmas Day and posting on Facebook to say that we are standing in solidarity with you. And I'm like, wearing black on Christmas Day and you going out doesn't mean anything. You can't relate with somebody that actually went to church to actually just enjoy their vacation with their kids and got flogged out today. So yeah, we do believe we are saving the country in this way. They believe they're saving the country when they're actually sending guns to the country, when they're putting guns in the hands of the separatist fighters. They do not know who these guns are going to end up with. That's the problem.
Yeah, and I mean, oh, sorry, go ahead.
No.
Oh,
but
okay.
Ultimately, I can't actually blame the diaspora as much. Ultimately, this is still a mismanagement on the hands of the state. I always say that even if in this crisis, looking at this crisis, I always give partition blame 40-60 or 35-65. on the part of the government, because you're the person that's supposed to be in control. You're the person with the most resources. You're the person who is supposedly educated. The separatist fighters are acting out of passion and anger. They have been pushed to the wall. You created this mess in the first place. So even though I would say these people are not actually fighting for us any longer, but then the government was never fighting for us, and they are the ones that we voted in. Or actually, we didn't vote them in, but still, supposedly voted them in.
So, a lot of the things you mentioned, the Black Fridays, the hashtag and Anglophone crisis on Twitter, other social network, certainly, I mean, I'm an outsider, that certainly sort of exposed a lot of this situation to me. And I'm assuming that that's true of other people, again, that are probably outside, both the diaspora and obviously the Cameroonian population obviously knows about all of this. I know you've shared with me that very poignant video of testimony about the Young Bards for Peace. So I'm curious, you started talking about this, but considering your work, right, in youth development and the mission that's related to it, I imagine that you have to work alongside state authorities on a regular basis. How has the crisis impacted your work in this way, knowing that you're not exactly silent on the issue either?
Okay. First of all, advantage of being a small-scale organization that doesn't solicit funding is that Better Bit Cameroon doesn't work with any of the ministerial administrations. We don't work with anybody that actually is contributing to the crisis.
Wow. Okay.
We hold 4 projects quarterly, sponsored by our members. And we're just now trying to find more sustainable financial strategies, kind of like doing research consultancies. I'm training research assistants that will take on projects, and from the consultancies, we can fund our youth development projects, or selling memorabilia, merchandise that in line with that like slogan T-shirts and stuff like that can fund our projects. Mm-hmm. So we are not working with any of the administrators at all. I don't actually have to rub shoulders with them. Interestingly, it's not with my youth development work that I run into that problem that you're picking up of having to deal with people in power that contribute to the crisis. Interestingly, it's my work as an academic. As staff of the University of Oboya, that I actually had to experience that. I actually was nearly fired in 2017. Yeah, I was nearly fired in 2017 because I stepped on the wrong toes. Mm-hmm. They actually tried to get me fired because of that. For the most part, as a writer, what I write and what I share on social media, what I've actually found is those in power don't read. They don't really care. So honestly, perhaps I'm not famous enough, or perhaps I haven't made a video yet that has actually reached the wrong people, but I have never been at risk of getting arrested in the way that most people have. They really do not read. So those that are actually going to read what you wrote are those that actually already care a bit. For working in academia, we are kind of constrained. Perhaps an example of how our work has been affected in rubbing shoulders with these people. So you might have heard of Agbobala Congo, one of the consortium members that was arrested and kept in prison, arbitrarily arrested and kept in prison for about 8 months or 9 months in 2017. That actually aggravated, that's what pushed the crisis to where it is now. Because in the absence of he was the lawyers, part of the absence of the people that started the struggle, that's when the separatist fighters came up. So Agbo Congo was a part-time lecturer at the University of Boya, full-time lawyer, and part of the union that started this. So when he was arrested, released, he came back and he was teaching part-time. One of the questions he asked at the University of Boya, in an exam question related to the crisis, pretty much you're asking students to use an example from the ongoing Anglophone crisis, for example, to show international development law, international human rights law, sorry, because he's an international human rights lawyer.
Mhm.
And he was sacked for that. He was sanctioned for that. And the university is actually, the country is centralized. The president appoints who is the head of the university and subsequent leaders. So you already know. So when the exam questions got leaked and eventually he was fired. And that's the way they control us. So your livelihood is irrespective of whether you're a doctor, irrespective of whether you're published all the papers that you could possibly publish, irrespective of what knowledge you have. Whenever I go to say, okay, Better Bid Cameroon is having a Summer Randy Youth Right Contest, which is a contest for undergraduate students nationwide that we have annually. It's kind of like a rightivism project to encourage young people to think critically and express themselves, to engage in some form of rightivism, writing activism. And we had a theme concerning the crisis recently, not really directly, but we could not state Anglophone crisis because we were afraid. So one of the ways we ask students to do is to basically ask how we go about peace or sustainable, something regarding justice, and what they think of the voicelessness in the crisis, although we did not state the word crisis. But in going to the university to say, can we put up the flyers for the contest? We had to go through hell of processes to get permission to be able to advertise. And they were like, can you tone this down? What do you mean by this word? And they're just basically saying, we do not want people to talk about this. We do not want people to write about this. We do not want people to acknowledge that there is a problem. So that's the way I can say I confront or I have struggled in the course of my work with the authorities, but not really head-on clash.
Mm-hmm. Wait, so you're currently you're teaching in Berea and you're studying in South Africa, or did I misunderstand?
Oh no, I have been teaching in Berea I was teaching in Berea between 2015 and 2018.
Right.
And then I returned to South Africa. I came to South Africa for the first time in 2018 to start my PhD. Mm. I returned home because my research was on higher education in Cameroon, women's higher education in Cameroon. So I returned home for research, and while I was there, I had been teaching part-time. So I've been going back and forth between Cameroon since 2018.
Okay. Right. So you still have to face this on a regular basis, then sort of having to navigate the demands and the sort of like censorship from the university administration that you just described. Huh.
Yes. Yeah, actually, the censorship is everywhere right now. We're afraid to actually even speak in taxis because you don't know if there's a police in plain clothes next to you. People have been picked up like that.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, so you know, we were also talking about this just earlier, but you know, it's difficult not to consider the long-lasting impact of colonialism when considering the crisis. Its relation to linguistic divide, for example. I mean, you mentioned this, right? I mean, it seems that's maybe the most obvious relation, but even, you know, everything else we've talked about, from the, you know, action or lack thereof from international bodies, you know, the presence of the diaspora that can sort of echo colonial or neo-colonial, you know, actions that we just said. You know, the movement to try and solve the crisis also highlighted issues of corruption that are related to foreign intervention, however well that was meant. So I'm curious, what might a decolonial approach to the crisis entail, do you think? And do you find that this angle, like the decolonial angle, informs your or other activists' actions in relation to the crisis?
Yes, I would say a decolonial approach. First, I would say, you mean my personal reaction to the crisis? Yes, I would say anything I put forward as the way I think the crisis should be addressed is informed by decolonial theory and decolonial perspective. For me, I don't know. Even in terms of other activist action, yes, I would say a lot of them. A Kawala, for example, yes, definitely considering a decolonial approach in the way she goes about her things, she does consider that.
Mhm.
And but not to be vague for anybody listening, and in when I say decolonial approach, first and foremost, what I mean is not expecting anyone to come save us until we're ready to save ourselves. We throw the word decolonial around a lot without actually explaining like what do we mean by that.
Right.
I would say for me, a decolonial approach first and foremost is not expecting anybody to come save us until we are ready to save ourselves, because we are instruments in the struggle. We are instruments in this. We are contributing to it from both sides. Not equally, obviously, but still, we are contributing from it for both sides. We must determine ourselves and not be determined for others by others. And a decolonial approach would mean prioritizing those most affected by the crisis, those on the ground. Not saying that those in the diaspora should not have a say. I wish instead that they should have a say, if they could be formalized, if perhaps dual nationality was recognized, if we could actually ensure transparent elections to get their votes in, to get their voices heard. It would have been better than the way they're going about it right now. I would say a decolonial approach, above all else, would mean revisiting history. I think one of my biggest pet peeves with Cameroon, although actually not a really pet peeve, just a peeve, a very big peeve with Cameroon, is the fact that we tend to want to move on from history. We tend to want to forget. We refuse to revisit history. We refuse to acknowledge history. A lot of our educational systems are so different. If you ask Francophones about the Fumban conference, they might not know. Some Anglophones themselves will not know. A lot of people do not understand why we actually have 20th May as our national day. Our history is being erased, and we do not want to remember. They do not acknowledging the wounds that have been meted out. And I think a decolonial approach to this crisis would be revisiting history, would be acknowledging that this happened and this time. This is what the contract was. And even if we're considering only from 2016, we'll be acknowledging that this is what you did at this time. And then going forward, you made this mistake here. This is when the government burnt a village down. And this is what made it spiral out of control to the point that we are now. We must act. We want so badly to sweep things under the rug, but we must acknowledge what happened in order to actually resolve the crisis. So a decolonial approach, I think, would be refusing to accept what has been told to us and sweep things and actually find out, address the problem from the root, so to speak. And that's actually what I do in terms of, with regards to Better Breed, in terms of raising critical consciousness, which is something that we prioritize a lot. Like get young people to actually question, where is this from? Why are we doing this? Why are they saying this? Because they don't actually want you to think for yourself, and they don't want you to remember. Remembering is an act of protest.
Is that, yeah, I realized we didn't necessarily talk too much about what you do in Better Breed Cameroon. So you also, there's also classes, or do you like you say, do you read the news with the kids? I mean, what you started talking about?
No, we don't really read the news with kids. Generally, we share information on our site. Like one of the things that we did way before this crisis even started, I think this was in 2014, that 2014 actually outlined the history of the merger blog posts. that's pretty much informing young people. History of the merger, kind of like telling an account of the history. When Paul Biya was coming for his first time in like over a decade, visiting the Southwest region. I remember we released that blog post. In that year, I think we also did like a box pop to kind of find out, do you know why we celebrate 28th May? We gave out prizes for those that gave the correct answer, things like that. It's pretty much little ways. We have had town halls, small groups with young people where we discuss with them, but it's not like we're reading the news to them. It's pretty much giving them an opportunity. It's pretty much dialogue, discussing with them.
Yeah, well, that's it. So that leads me to this question. Many of the efforts on the ground that I've read about between demonstrations in Bamenda, the petition to the IMF and the UN, which I know you signed, are seem to me specifically efforts led by women. And it seems to me that women in this way are very much at the forefront of the struggle, right? And I would say, again, on the face of it, especially of peaceful struggle and sort of alternative answers to this. I know there's a long tradition of women's involvement in Cameroonian politics, which maybe is also part of what's been erased, right? I mean, I'm thinking about Rose Ndenge's work on this, and the fact that that's not necessarily what you hear about even when you hear about Cameroonian tradition of Cameroonian independent politics. I know you study African feminism. I'm just curious, how do you see these actions, like in relation to Cameroonian political history, but also maybe in the broader dynamics of Afrofeminism and African feminism?
Yeah, to say, how do I see this? Our constant response to our constant cleaning up after men's problems. I think yes, honestly, and I'm getting tired of it. I'm really sick and tired of cleaning up after people. Can we stop cleaning up after the other gender? I just wish you could kill yourselves and it'd be like we'll be okay. But I guess I love Rose's. I love that you mentioned Rose's work and her hashtag Cameroon History inspired a campaign that we did for Women's Month last year. Better Bit Cameroon did for Women's Month last year, trying to feature the women that I was never taught in history in secondary school. I didn't know their names till I was my late 20s. In fact, people still don't know their names. We made T-shirts with their names on them in like Cameroon history and the matriarchs of the country, so to speak. And everybody's like, what are those? I don't want to buy that T-shirt because I don't know anybody's name there. I'm like, please Google it. That's the point. But I would say generally, every time I see us doing this, women are you say women are at the forefront of response. I don't think so. Women are not at the forefront of response. Women are at the forefront of peaceful response. Women are the only ones doing peaceful response. Right. Unfortunately, women are left out. Even the Ministry of Women's Affairs is left out of any form of reconciliation. In 2019, it's 2019, I think, yeah. I think it's 2019 that we had the government claimed to have resolved the crisis. They had fixed everything. They had a national dialogue for peace and reconciliation around October 2019. And they said they had taken some people from the bushes and they had solved the problem already. And they brought everybody together in Yaoundé and had one big feast. Funny enough, I don't know if you know UN resolution 1613 or 1632, pretty much that Cameroon signed and ratified, and the ministry has a plan of action for it. The Ministry of Women's Affairs has a plan of action for it. It's pretty much that we've signed and ratified all these great documents. On paper, Cameroon is one of the best countries ever. It has better laws than the US. It has better laws than anybody. We actually will. We have signed and ratified everything that we need to get funding. So funny enough, the Ministry of Women's Affairs that actually signed this resolution that has a plan of action for how they're going to do all these great things to involve women in peace building, was not invited for the national dialogue by the minister, by the prime minister. I mean, you appointed this woman. So basically, the least you could do was just put her there. It's not like we're expecting her to do anything. But the least you could do was just kind of like, yeah, we included women in this way, but they weren't there. That's pretty much how the response is. We do not get involved until a child dies, and then you see women weeping on the road, and that's their protest action, or women writing letters, or women. It's usually our voices trying to call attention to something that help or stop fighting. That's women are the ones that are getting the most, the biggest bruises. And I can give you countless stories. We have countless stories of how the women are actually in the middle of this, the grass between the two elephants. But when it comes to which organizations or which ministries are getting the most funding for addressing the problem, or who is getting the media attention, definitely not the women. Kawala has been has been the most consistent political opposition member for as long as I know, since 2011. And all through this, she has been the most consistent in her stance. Nobody's actually asked her to say, am I inviting you to say, okay, what can we do to address? Because she will tell you the truth and you don't want to hear it. So on the ground, the women are leading CSO actions that actually is doing the most. But if you have to evaluate who gets the most funding, and definitely not those organizations led by women. So we just continue cleaning up after.
Did you see any change after the petition? Because I remember seeing that it gets some play in the Cameroonian press. I don't know if it was just the one headline, but
there was just.
Oh,
I didn't get your question.
Oh yeah, no, I was just curious. Like, did you see any change in after that action? Because it seemed, and again, I speak as a complete outsider.
If I see any. Well, we have gotten a lot more respect for women online, I guess. A lot more attention given the efforts, the contributions that women make. But still, it's in a kind of sexist fashion. Let me give you an example of how, of why so. I remember one of the most annoying things that I witnessed when the struggle went out of hand, as unraveling, when they had arrested the union members, the consortium members, and those influencers online, those in the diaspora took over. These people, after waging lockdowns and ghost towns and violence on school children for disrespecting it, and the military responds by violence, more violence. Mark Barretta went online and declared that women should go and hold takambang. And I don't know if you know the practice of takambang or if you've ever heard of it, but it's a form of protest. Is that a form of protest? I would say, yeah, it's a way older women, at least in some tribes, express their displeasure and a way of kind of keeping authority in check. There's a fear of seeing a woman's nakedness. It's a taboo that if plan your mother or your own older woman's nakedness, it's a taboo. And so she goes out naked. Then this society of older women that have been initiated go out naked and pretty much are hailing curses on you. So it was a way that was used in the 1990s to check government militarism around the multipartism period when multipartism was introduced. But so this young boy, I'll say young boy because honestly he's young, and he is not old enough to this woman. He's not old enough in comparison to the women that belong in such a society. Comes online on Facebook and declares, after you guys have caused all this mess, pretty much, you're asking women to come on the streets and do that, perform that action, that is actually considered sacred, to clean up the mess after you. And it was just so insulting because it's like, this is when you involve us. When it concerns if you have to look at the Amazonian executives, it's probably at most one woman there. But you guys have been declaring your separatist fighting and you're declaring your ghost towns, and no woman is involved in the declaration of any of this. But then when shit hits the fan, you're like, yeah, can you guys come to the streets now and do whatever you do and scare them with your bodies?
Yeah, it's I know of this. I remember now from a talk by Rose, actually. She mentioned it. So after you described it, I remember. I mean, I feel like, beyond the gender conversation, which is absolutely enormous, right? I mean, it's not obviously not just Cameroon in this way. I mean, it is as you said to begin with, it's very much a gender thing. But I mean, violence is so easy, right? I mean, in a way, it just feels like, as a resort, as something to call for when you have nothing to do with it. It's just I don't know. I mean, I don't really have a question. I'm just thinking as you speak, and it's just endlessly depressing, right? Because it takes so much to actually develop nonviolent action.
Depressing is the key word.
Right. It really, I mean,
it is extremely depressing. It is extremely depressing when you see how powerless you are in the face of both the government that you already hate and the person that claims to be saving you. Both people claim to be acting on your behalf. The government claims that they are protecting you from separationist fighters. The separationist fighters say they're liberating you from the government. Mm-hmm. And nobody's asking you. And nobody's asking you. Right.
I mean, again, as you said, that the kidnapping of the pregnant lady was very recent. And as was the shooting of this little girl. Do you see any improvement at this point, or do you what do you? I mean, that's also a pretty big question, but yeah, do you see that situation changing at all? Considering that, I mean, again, I feel like there are also quite a lot of interventions and actions that seem to be, I mean, to me, that seem to me inching towards different ways of solving all these issues, right? And the issues that piled up upon the original issue that are related fairly directly to the use of violence. I mean, again, it's depressing, but let's say if you have hope, what does it lie in?
If you asked me, do I think, or how do I think this can be resolved? I would give you ideas of how I think anybody that actually wants to help the situation right now can start. I can give you step by step how you can start by addressing the problem. Yes. But if you're asking me, do I think it's going to be resolved anytime soon? Then the answer is no. Mm-hmm. Not because I think nobody's going to take my ideas of the step by step because they're not following my ideas. Not because of that. But because any way I look at it, this last trip back home, I was in Cameroon in September. This last trip back home was actually even more depressing because of how the human beings can acclimatize to anything. And we've just kind of normalized madness. We've normalized the checkpoints. I walk around with pepper spray since 2018. We've normalized the fact that just the way we've bought generators to deal with sporadic electricity, we've also considered that this part of the town we don't go to, we do shopping near. We've accepted the way things are. We've normalized the ghost towns. We now have Jangi meetings on ghost towns. like the meeting that we used to have on Sundays that we get together, people now get together in small groups on Mondays. So I used to ask myself, like I said, I spent 6 years in the US as a child, and I remember having fire drills. And I remember when I was studying Syrian war when I was undergrad, and we were finding it around 2010, I remember asking myself or thinking, do these people have bomb drills the way we had fire drills? And I would never have thought that it'd come to a point that I'm asking myself in Cameroon, are we going to start having drills for shootings in schools? So we're getting used to everything. There are ways that we have actually adjusted our ways of living to the crisis. And aside from that, in a way that I no longer see it ending anytime soon because it's profitable. When I was graduating, there were no organizations, INGOs in the Northwest region or Southwest region, apart from Plan and one Plan office and one GIZ office. That was 2012, 2013. I graduated with a degree in gender and sociology, remember, and I was looking for organizations to work with. I had to apply to local NGOs, CSOs. The INGOs that actually have like good jobs, all of them are based in Yaoundé. It's not like they're supposed to be there. The rural areas are the areas that actually need the development. So you would think they would have offices in our areas, but they did not. However, with the coming of the crisis between 2018 and 2021, there's a whole new Bastos in Buea with all these organizations now in Buea. And all these organizations that weren't there before are now hiring expats and paying everybody as much as they want, as much as they can. So it's profitable. The war is profitable. Not only for the government that's getting more funding for its military, but also for people, civilians that are getting jobs now in their hometown. Also for the separationist fighters, people that do not have any education, that are pretty much using these guns to terrorize us. They have power that they've never had before. So how do you end a war when you start it? That's why we say you don't start it. That's why we try to stop it. You do not start it because you can't stop it. Who is going to get the guns out of the hands of the separationist fighters, the people in the bushes that are now using it to kidnap people, ask for ransom? You got the guns to liberate the people, but now you're now using it for kidnapping. So who is going to get the guns out of the bushes? Even if you say tomorrow that we're declaring a federation, and I hope they do, it will be a step in the right direction. But the war doesn't end that way. It's just like you say, even if you declare the next day saying that, okay, hopefully, as we're waiting for a day from now, the president finally dies. It doesn't change the policy though. It doesn't change the system that's already been created and the route that you've already cemented. Because we still have a lot to reconcile. We still have a lot, and there are no rehabilitation centers. That's something very disturbing of all the NGOs that have been set up. And that's one of the things that I keep looking at them like, the INGOs, I'm not sure you guys are coming here to help. Not a single center has been set up for rehabilitation of the young people that are in the bushes that have been made to become extremists. So even if you tell them now that the war is over, we're going to return to a federal republic, how are you going to rehabilitate them? There are no centers, there's literally nothing. These people are those that were bike riders, those that were jobless, those that were uneducated, that have now been given a bit of power. They're becoming those town enforcers. They're becoming the army, the separationist fighters, the Amazonian army. So how are you going to give them that much power again?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like this all points to, again, like things you've said before, and obviously what you're addressing with Better Breed Cameroon, which is that, one of the things that they're necessary anyway, but as you say, education and long-term vision, right? I mean, you say you don't help, victims of trauma by just throwing money at them. You have to have a system. You have to be on the ground. You have to trust people to do what's best for themselves, as opposed to, all the things that sort of that lead your organization. I feel we've been talking about for the past 2 weeks, but it's it's really, the dimension of the work at hand is somewhat staggering, right? But it's also, clearly, some people are doing it, I guess. I can see how that's never enough, but okay, let me see. So in this series of interviews, there are questions we always ask everyone, and the first one is a question in 3 parts. If you were to choose just one thing as an answer to each, what would you decolonize, what would you defund, and what would you abolish? I'll start. What would you decolonize?
It's hard to choose one thing to decolonize, eh?
Say what?
I think everything needs to be decolonized. It's hard to choose one thing to decolonize.
I know. This is not a very nice question.
As an African woman, I would decolonize beauty. I would decolonize sexuality. I would definitely, above all else, decolonize education. Do I have to choose one? Can I religion? There's so many.
It's like, oh, okay, it's okay. We'll bend the rules. What would you defund?
The common answer is defund the police. But in our case, though, in the case of Cameroon, defunding the police will help, but the police don't control themselves. I think I would defund the state. And by defunding the state, I mean, can you just stop giving them money? Can the loans stop coming? Because we're paying. So I would definitely defund the state.
Well, it's funny because usually I tend to find this question a little bit abstract, but that's essentially what your petition was asking the IMF and the UN for, right? So I could see the state. So what would you abolish?
A lot of the bureaucratic processes that keep tribalism in place in my country. Some things like, I don't know if listeners will actually understand, but we have something like certificate of non-conviction, which basically is you're applying for a certificate to show that you've never been convicted by the police. But to do this, you have to go back to the town where you were born. It's only there. So even if I've never lived there before,
right,
that's where I get, So they don't really have a system. It doesn't work. I'll abolish things like that. I'll abolish the system that demands that I should list what tribe I am from on every document. And it's a way, according to them, to secure regional balance, but it's pretty much used to reinforce tribalism.
Right.
According to them, it's a way of affirmative action, but no, it's not. Right. So I would abolish that. I would abolish those things that they use to pretty much keep the system in place. I will abolish the colonial contracts that we're still tied to.
Okay. What must be free for all?
Water. we're still at basic needs. I would definitely say water. Yeah, water and electricity, but at least water. Let's just take one.
And the final question is, what is the soundtrack to your struggle if you were to choose 3 songs?
Okay, this one's hard. This one is hard, so I don't know. I really do not know.
Oh no. I mean, it doesn't have to be perfect.
Let's say Jill Scott's Who Manifesto is like my feminist struggle, I guess. One. I don't. Oh, okay, this is hard.
I know. I'm glad I don't have to answer those questions, to be honest.
This is extremely hard. Ayo Africa Lapiro. Oh, sorry, not Lapiro. One of the Cameroonian singers. I think I sent you the link to it.
Oh yeah, is it Longue Longue or was that?
Yes, that will definitely be one. Ayo Africa, that will definitely be one. Honestly.
You're almost there.
Yeah. I think I get to the third. There's one thing though, when I think of this question, we keep I don't want to choose openly protest songs.
Mm-hmm.
I do like the idea of I love music. I love music a lot. But unlike and just like reading for me, I like to use books and reading and music to escape.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, within academia, and as you grow up, people stop using books to escape and actually want you to read literary books and things that like are breaking down walls. And I'm like, yeah, I just want Harry Potter. I don't want to know what J.K. Rowling is saying. I don't want to actually be in the real world. I want the fantasy. And as far away from reality as possible, I know it's fiction. I actually just want to escape. So it's the same thing with music, and as far from reality, I guess, as possible. Although I would say there are tons of protest songs that I could say, like, yeah, Files, This Is Nigeria, at least for Nigeria, or Well Done, Sir, things that actually have contemporary issues within them. Well, and that's Files, a Nigerian artist. So I can actually say, yeah, these are protest songs, but is it a song that I'm actually going to be playing when I actually just want to chill? No.
Hey, it's your soundtrack, so you can choose whatever you want.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Wait, so that was that your third one? Mm-hmm. Okay, so sorry, I didn't write it. Could you say it again?
The third?
Yeah.
I didn't get you. The third song. Okay, This Is Nigeria, I guess. Although it doesn't really make sense, but I think, yeah.
No, I think
we can relate. This Is Nigeria, Files.
Okay, awesome. No, I think I mean you didn't have to explain anything, but I think you explained it well. I think that makes total sense. I think most people chose them that way anyway. That was sort of like there's always a song that's like, no, it's not about. I mean, because you're right, and that's not exactly how we listen to music all the time. Sure, your point about literature really speaks to me because obviously I teach it, so that's pretty much all I read these days is what I'm teaching. And then every once in a while, I have a moment where I read 4 novels that have nothing, that I know I will never teach, just because I've just had enough of, thinking like a professor about what I should be reading for entertainment. So
yeah, we tend to we get into overthinking mode
all the time. Anyway, all right, I'm gonna stop the recording here.